over to Kayla Hermanson.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Kayla. I'll be the other MC for the evening. Before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Secwepemc people. So this evening is designed to help people feel informed and prepared to participate in the civic election process. Our focus is on the process itself, practical tips for voters, and the broader picture of civic engagement. If you're running in the election, welcome as well. We appreciate your interest and participation in being here today. We just ask that candidates not monopolize the Q&A and dialogue portion of the evening, as this session is intended primarily as a learning opportunity for our voters. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. So the event is being recorded. Please also help yourselves to some refreshments. We have nachos and some ice cream, I hear, is coming as well. And then bathrooms are located just outside in the lobby, just past the reception desk. As for tonight's agenda, we'll begin with a presentation from former Mayor Ken Christian, and then that'll be followed by a question and discussion period afterwards. And after a short break, we'll hear from a panel of local journalists about election coverage, key community issues, and how residents can engage with the local media. Then we'll wrap up the evening with another Q&A and then just some closing remarks. So thank you again for being here. I'll pass it back over to Tom.
Thank you, Kayla. And, I think our chronicle was born out of the need we saw as a society for bringing news back into the focus of especially seniors, but many other segments of our community that were feeling a hole in their ability to find out about things. And so that goal has resulted in us having 21 new issues. We're looking at bringing a second issue every month onto the table. We have a collection of reporters, freelancers, as well as contributors. And our goal is to actually become a very sustainable enterprise in the next year or two. And we look forward to that. And it's important, I think, because of the need for news in our society, to make sure that things don't become polarized, as we see so many places in the world right now. And it's not just here in south of the border, but all through Europe. You see the news daily, and you see that the world is becoming more polarized. And I think it's a truism that as people understand more about the way other people think and the way other people live, that polarization decreases. So I think it's important to keep that flow of information going. And thank you to all our other media folks in the room for the work that you do to make sure that everybody has access to good, reliable information. I think the goal tonight, as Kayla said, is to allow us to have a free and open discussion. And what we'll do is we'll act as sort of tag teams when we take our other microphones so everybody can hear, and it'll be recorded for our long-term record. So without any more ado, I'll turn it back to Kayla and she can introduce our first speaker.
Thanks, Tom. So before we welcome former Mayor Ken Christian, I'll just be doing a short bio. So Ken Christian was the former mayor of Kamloops. He was elected successfully in 10 consecutive local elections in Kamloops from 1993 to 2018. During that time, he served 18 years as a school trustee, including 8 years as a board chair, along with 2 terms as a city councillor and 2 terms as mayor. He was active with the hospital district, airport authority, and many local business associations. His work at City Hall was shaped by a strong interest in infrastructure improvements, adoption of a climate action plan, and attention to the social detriments of health. His final years in politics included leadership through the COVID-19 pandemic and multiple climate-related emergencies, including heat, flood, and fire. He is a life member of the Canadian Institute of Public Health Inspectors and has received numerous awards for his public and professional contributions to the region. Ken and his wife Brenda have 3 adult children, Nick, John, and Taryn, and 4 beautiful grandchildren. Without further ado, welcome Ken Christian.
Thank you so much, Kayla. And you snuck in my new granddaughter. She's it's a pleasure to be here with my old friend Arjun and Tom and yourself, Kayla, tonight just to talk about the election in Q. First of all, how many of you voted in 2022 in the Kamloops municipal election? Hands up, hands up. Okay, so you're not the problem. And you know, I was thinking as I was driving over that Canada runs as a participatory democracy, and that's the tenet you know, of how we govern ourselves. But the problem is the participants aren't participating, and it is especially true at the municipal level. When I look at the last federal election, we have two ridings in Kamloops now. The one that Caputo holds, I believe, about 69% voter turnout, and the one that Mel Arnold holds in Valley Barnardale about 71%. Both of those were higher than the provincial or the national average, which was about 68%. Not bad, you know, for federal elections. And then you turn your attention to provincial elections, and 2024, I think I looked that up. In the ridings in Kamloops, there was a voter turnout of 58.45%, 2024 and 2020. 53, 2017, 61. So somewhere around the 50s, 53 to about 60 to high. Still not bad, and good participation. And then you get down to the local level. You get down to the city of Kamloops election, and in the last civic election in Kamloops, and I just want to make sure that I captured that, 30.4%. Wow, which interestingly was higher than the provincial average in the election in 2022. So you see the federal government getting about 70% of the voters out, provincial government somewhere around 50, 60, and municipal level 30%. That is not good. And as I say, a participatory democracy will only work with the electorate getting out and exercising their franchise. And I don't know, I was brought up to believe that that was my responsibility and that was something that I want to do. But as you look over time at the data that's been produced in terms of the Kamloops civic election, there's about 20,000 people in Kamloops that vote. And as the city gets bigger, the percentage of voters is less. And I suggest to you, although I don't have any data to prove it, but those 20,000 people are people like all of us in this room. So we're really missing out on millennials and Generation X in terms of their involvement in civic politics. So why would that be, right? I've mused about it and analyzed data. As Gail mentioned, I ran successfully in 10, the last 10 election. I didn't run in 2022, retired in November of that year. But in the 10 that I ran, you know, I get data from the city of Kamloops that's quite granular. It talks about every particular poll and how every particular candidate did in every particular poll. And if you have a stronger election team, you will analyze that data, particularly if you tend to move it going forward. You see that in areas where there's steady populations, not a lot of turnover, my percentage of the popular vote is very, very steady. And where you see new young people moving in, tend to decline over time. I was fortunate in all but one election. I topped the polls. That one election, John McPhee beat me by 17 votes in 1993. Not that it bothers me. But anyway, you look at that data, you look at it over time, and you start to really wonder, what is keeping people away from the polls. So I think there are a number of things. One is that it's a little bit more complicated the federal election in particular, people are motivated by party loyalties and their party memberships, and the party drives a lot of that vote. They have a program called GOTV, it simply means get the vote, and it can be very complex, and it drives people to the polls, and they're reminded and they're committed with information and that kind of thing to get out and vote. They're more likely to do it. The same, to a lesser degree, holds true with provincial elections. But in municipal elections, it's a kind of a cast of characters that are out there campaigning on their own. And unless you have a very, very close race or in a very, very heated situation in a community, you're going to see that 30% level. Now, that's not always the case. I'm happy to say that Hudson Hope had a voter turnout in 2022 of about 89%. The mayor even blew the doors off us with 60%. They had a very close race between the current mayor and Mayor Brown, who it was at that time. So certain things can drive interest in a municipal election, but by and large, it's a more complicated beast than going simply to a provincial election. I'm going to vote Liberal or I'm going to vote NDP, and that piece and you can leave. With a civic election, first of all, when you walk in the door, you're going to get 3 ballots. Well, that's complicated things already. So the first one, or the shortest one, the easiest one, is the one for mayor. And there could be anywhere. I ran for mayor twice, so I ran once against one other person, and the first time against 5 other people. So you simply go down that list, pick the person you like, the X or the tick mark, and then you put it into the machine and it counts. Now with councillors, it's a bit more complicated because you're going to elect 8 councillors in the city of Kamloops. So you can vote up to 8. You can't vote for 9. If you vote for 9, you spoil your ballot. So you have to kind of keep track of who you want to have and which way to go with that ballot. Is you don't have to vote for 8. You can vote for 1. You can vote for 5 people you wanted to support. And sometimes that could be better because the person that you didn't necessarily want to vote for beats the candidate that you really want. Right? So some people do strategic voting that way, but you have to make sure that you get your 8 in there as a maximum. And then the next thing on the next ballot they give you is one for school trustee. Now, I was 18 years on the school board, and those were years that my children were going to school, and I was particularly involved in the school system and public education. And it was very important to me. It may not be important to other people, particularly if you look at the population declines and lower birth rates. It's obviously not as important now as it was 25 years ago. So now you're faced with this choice about having a ballot. You don't have to put anything on it. But if you did with the city of Kamloops, you put 5 names on it. And you have to make sure that you don't put 6. Same thing happens to your ballot. And so that becomes a bit more complicated for people. The other thing that happens is that, people are kind of busy now, as opposed to, I remember when my parents would go to the vote, and when I was a young child in the Okanagan, it was a big deal. They got dressed up, go vote. It was a huge deal. And we'd go down, make a big issue out of it. We're going to vote, something got to do, that sort of thing. Now people are going disc golfing, right? Or they're going to something else that interferes with their ability to kind of put that 15 minutes in to get down and vote. And as crass as it sounds, that's what's happening. People find all kinds of excuses. And one of the pieces of data that drives that theory is the fact that the number of ballots in the advance poll continues to climb. So people in the city of Kamloops normally they would have probably 3 advance polling dates. And so you would be able to go on any of those dates and then the general voting day. And people don't like to kind of be confined in one, worried about the lineup, worried about this, worried about. I voted in this town a lot, and I've never really held up more than 15 minutes to exercise on the vote. So that's really not an excuse, other than it's an excuse people use. But in any case, the city of Kamloops, bless their hearts, are working hard through the communication department and the office of the corporate officer to make voting as easy as they possibly can and to make it as simple as they possibly can. So what will happen in the coming months, I don't believe it's happened yet, is that the city of Kamloops will invoke a elections bylaw for 2026. And they will appoint a returning officer and a deputy returning officer. That returning officer will identify polling places. And generally, I got a list of years that were used, this was 2018. They try to use elementary schools, maybe occasionally secondary schools, heritage house is always used. So places that have good parking, easy access, aren't going to be otherwise conflicted, so that people can, get rid of that excuse for that vote. And then they're going to identify general voting day, which we already know it's October the 17th this year. And they're going to identify days for advanced polling. And those advanced polls will be generally at Heritage House, but they can be elsewhere. They try to move to the North Shore, South Shore. They can get yes in the past. And they also have the provision for mail ballot. And so that's another way that they're kind of working towards making this a simpler exercise for individuals. Nonetheless, we see our voter turnout, and it wasn't just in 2022. The election before that, in 2018, I did quite well in 2018. 30.6% of the population voted. That's 0.2% more than last time. So I was fortunate in that election to garner 84% of the vote. But, so that equates to a large number of people, about 17,000 votes in that year. I think it was one of the highest totals I ever had out of the elections. But you really need to kind of think of that. It's a big number, but most of the people didn't vote for you. Right? And that is an unfortunate reality of municipal elections, not just in Kamloops, but throughout British Columbia. And it's not just in the interior. It's, in Coquitlam, it's in the Nile, it's in Victoria. That same kind of malaise that sort of captures the voter, or doesn't capture the voter more accurately, in terms of, what they're going to do on election day. It's important. It matters. What you say matters, how you say it matters. And you need to listen carefully if you're informed elector. But you have to take that final step and using that information to make a decision. And that it's not about who you vote for, it's about the fact that you voted. So Arjun, I don't know if I used up my 10 minutes.
Good job.
Perfect. That's all I have to say, but I did want to leave some time for questions. But I guess the final thought that I had in terms of trying to increase, as individuals trying to increase the voter turnout is talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your co-workers, your church groups, your sport groups. But it's a difficult conversation sometimes to have if it's nonpartisan. Very easy to go in and say, I think you should support, Billy, your school trustee, and come on out and vote. But when you just say generically to people, you really need to get out there and vote. It's kind of one of those kind of conversations that it doesn't happen very well. You could use municipal incentives to vote. So some simple ones would be things like, go down and vote and you can get your treat coupon, something like that. You get to know. But that, gets a bit tackier, cheesy when you start to do that.
How about ice cream? Free ice cream.
Free ice cream. Or you have, as in Australia, mandatory voting. You have to vote or they'll find you. But again, I think all of those are ideas that could come to fruition. But the problem is bad and getting worse, unfortunately. And that's been my observation over 10 municipal elections. Okay, over to you.
Question.
Well, I've got one question. I noticed that the TNRD, is that elected at the same time or?
Great question. The TNRD has eight, I believe, not eight appointees for Kamloops.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so they are appointed by council. So council will decide which eight of your councilors are going to be there. Everywhere else, they're going to be appointed by council if it's a municipality and if it's an electoral area, like the former member of Boston, those who used to run in the area around Kamloops. I believe Lee Morris runs there now. That is actually an election, but it's only held for those people residing in that particular area. You don't get a say in them. The other interesting question, because I get this all the time, is I live in Sun Rivers, why can't I vote? You know, I work in town, I shop in town, I skate in town, but I can't vote in town because you don't live in town. If you're going to vote in an election, you have to be 18 years of age. You have to be a Canadian citizen. You have to live in British Columbia for 6 months and in Kamloops for 30 days, I believe. And then you can vote. But you have to be in the municipality or the jurisdiction in which you're going to vote. And they over there in Sun Rivers are in the Thompson-Nicola Regional District, the rural area P, I believe. Yeah, you're right. Sun Peaks and Lakes, I think. So they get a vote, they get a vote over there. Okay, thank you. Yes.
What would you say the biggest understanding about mayor and council in terms of the decisions of the board council people?
Oh, head and shoulders. The biggest issue is the scope of the job. People are going to, and trust me, when you're mayor, you become the complaints department for the city of Kamloops. But I had people phoning about cell phone rates. I had people phoning about gas prices. I had people phoning about all kinds of things. And to some degree, politicians, even at the local level, are responsible for this scope creep because they kind of get their nose into things that they shouldn't necessarily be doing. And it happens a lot with issues that are international. During the time that I was first elected, the Ukrainian-Russia conflict came on, so there was issues about that. There was an awful lot of issues related to the COVID pandemic and those kinds of things. So you have to really make sure you stick to the knitting and keep in your lane as a politician. You need to be able to say, hey, COVID, that's provincial jurisdiction. You need to go there and talk to them about it. The international relationship between Russia and the Ukraine is a federal issue. You need to talk to your MP about that and try to stay out of that because otherwise it just muddies the water. People have an expectation about the mayor and council's role and what they can do that is really far from the truth. And then there's this sort of unmet desire and people get frustrated and then they won't vote.
What's your take on slate politics within this province?
It's used in larger municipalities. When we've seen it in Kamloops, the Action 88 team and a few others tends to kind of be a mechanism by which to get elected that tends to kind of fall apart fairly quickly afterwards. The issues in a municipality the size of Kamloops don't necessarily lend themselves to slate politics. You can go one way with the person beside you on one issue related to the crosswalk, and then you could vote another way with an issue related to the cost of state, right? And so those things don't necessarily all line up into a political philosophy. And so that's why I would recommend it in an area this size. In a place like Vancouver, we're in Surrey, where you have a much broader reach. I think a slate helps with name recognition and your ability to kind of get elected. But in Kamloops, the electors generally kind of see through that. And I've seen in some instances where they pick one person off of the slate and leave 4 others off. So it's kind of the way that goes.
Well, I think just to throw out some, and the current state we have right now in Kamloops has announced, they're kind of, what I've heard is they're basically trying to talk about people very diverse collaborating, kind of in sort of like contrast what's happening now on councils. I think that's kind of the world that they're coming from. It's a fair point.
Yeah, the other thing is that, you know, slate or no slate, you have to be prepared to work with the people that have been elected by the population. And it's ultimately a public decision. And so that becomes kind of awkward when people are even sort of are particularly biased or slate focused in terms of their campaigns. The other thing that you have to remember is campaigning is an 8-week period. The campaigning ends, the work begins, and you have to start the campaign. That can't carry on through a term because it tends to just mess with, the resolve about issues on public hearings and negotiations with QP and everything else, right? So you have to be prepared to roll up your sleeves and do the work, and that work changes. Right now, we probably don't know the issues that are going to face the next council. In Kamloops, they haven't really, come up yet, and you always have to be prepared. I can remember one day in my garden, and I had a social media monitor in my campaign group, and she got a hold of me and said, "There's been a plane crash at the airport." And I went out, looked over the fence, and sure enough, I saw a clump of smoke in front. There's always the day that Jennifer Casey was killed from the snowbird. So my day goes from, being in the garden to being on the national news and talking to the Prime Minister's office and Harjit Sajjan, Minister of National Defense, in like 6 hours, right? You don't know what's going to happen, but you have to be there in good times and in bad. So it's kind of the way these things go. And you really need to not be encumbered in your ability to do that. You had a question.
What is your best elevator speech for encouraging people to get them to vote?
Well, the one simple thing is if you didn't vote, you can't complain.
I can say if I want it.
Yeah.
That does not work.
Yeah, exactly. But in terms of that piece, about a citizen's responsibility to preserve a democracy is inherent in the right to vote. And the right to vote is not something that comes simply. We've forgotten that. And we've taken on this task now where we're, during my period in office, that goes from 1993 until 2022. The biggest change, the first 10, 50 years were kind of all the same. The biggest change happened about 2008 with the advent of the internet. And then it happened about 2011, that first election with social media. And then it happened with the first election of Donald Trump. So now you had people that had an internet, they had a social media platform, and they had somebody that had no boundaries. So that just sort of set them loose. And then things were kind of the same until COVID hit. And now you had people that had the internet, had social media, had no boundaries, and they were stuck at home. And many of them didn't want to be there. And so that really started a real bad discourse in the political arena. And then you add Trump 2.0 to it, and it's just gotten toxic.
And not really depressed.
So, that's just my observations as somebody who has lived it and seen those changes. It got towards the end of my time as mayor, and security became ridiculous. But you have to have security, you have to have all kinds of different things. So that was the reality of being a politician. Kamloops doesn't really lend itself to that kind of a feeling. You would expect until you grow with it, you see that that's kind of where things go. Yes.
One of the things that brought to from Manitoba was that municipal elections, you don't have a ward system. In Manitoba, we had a ward system, so I knew who the people were that were running in my district. And it was a little, in my mind anyway, a little more representative. And people were fairly representative from around the city.
First of all, congratulations on leaving Manitoba. Beyond that, your question is very relevant, and it's been something that's been discussed. And particularly around the time that the Kamloops was amalgamated, 1972, there was, the town of Valley View, the town of its own town, city of North Kamloops, city of Kamloops. So there was a lot of discussion then that there should be representatives from those little entities. But the prevailing thought over time has been that we need to govern the city cohesively. And we can't, arena goes into Broadhurst, now the next one needs to go into, Dallas or something like that. We need to put arenas where we have skaters. We need to think broadly. And, I've lived in the southeast sector the entire time that I have been elected, and sometimes I had to make decisions that a lot of my neighbors really didn't like, right? But they were in the broader interest of the entire community. And you have to kind of sit all of the saddle when those things come up. And they do from time to time with that overarching idea that you're doing what's best for the city of Kamloops. And you are the board of directors of the corporation of the city of Kamloops, and you never should forget this. Yes.
With friends or family and non-person, so for. I'm wondering why you feel that is and like what you can do to alleviate that frustration.
Yeah, no, maybe awkward is a poor choice of words. Maybe it's just that it doesn't have a lot of beat to it, right? You say, go both. It's kind of like saying, go out and exercise, right? It's you need to have more substance to the let's go on a 4K walk in Valley View Nature Park. Woo, makes something, right? But to say, sort of going out to vote, unless you can start to find some issues that you have in common with neighborhoods particularly, or the one with sports groups, because they're passionate about sport facility infrastructure. And often that can be something that will drive people out. And, you have to use all these mechanisms to try to find ways to kind of engage people. But I do think it's that younger group that we really need to work on. Okay, I think I've really used my time. Go ahead.
Let's do the last question.
Next time, this is just media. How do you think that local media can improve their coverage either in the election period or outside of the election period to encourage accountability?
Yeah, and maybe to some degree, the demise of the voter is related to the demise of journalism, and it's unfortunate because when I first started, there was a daily newspaper, there was a 2-day-a-week newspaper, there was television, there was 2 competing radio stations with aggressive coverage, and Angelo Iacobucci got arrested. So what I was doing before I knew it. And there was that kind of intensity, and that intensity made an informed electorate. Now people are ill-informed or misinformed, and sometimes intentional. And that really is the problem that I believe in your capable hands as journalists. That's a good answer. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you so much for your time, Ken. One last round of applause. Okay, I believe it's time for a short intermission, so enjoy some refreshments, and we'll come back in about 10-15 minutes to hear from our panel.
Okay, please have the ice cream and nachos. I paid for those. Yeah.
Maybe I'm like. Yeah. Or, yeah, I don't know, I'm not. There, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
How's stuff going? Yeah. We ended up, actually had, pretty good talking to you tonight.
I know. Yeah, but you're. Love it.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Why would I not? I won't steal that. Yeah.
Good question. I mean, generally, as a teacher, we could kind of feel like, sort of understanding from that, but I don't know exactly what kind of students right now, kind of find out. Article.
Quick hands with, so, yeah. Yeah, they don't know that, they have like, over here, myself has one. Yeah, I'll make sure in case I go earlier like that, I'll be like, hey, I'll, double check with the girls, I don't know here, but like, if I can find your like, email address, because like, girl, they talk about around. Yeah, totally, or I can check my phone number. Yeah, I'm still gonna figure it out, yeah. Yeah. So I want to make sure like, don't need that. Okay, so I think like, where am I supposed to do that? Yeah, totally. Because you're running out of bodies. Don't worry, we'll have it all. Oh, yeah, but I like to be all like, I kind of plan before I take off. Totally. Or somebody you guys can make it. Last week, like, let's do it next one. That, yeah. So, yeah, probably color powder. I love it. Yeah. I'm excited to have them. Last year, I found that some more engagement with it being, but we'll see. We're still going to kind of, you know, we might also put the food time at Riverside. I love it. Like, looking at like, I think, yeah, totally. It's just not like a trail run. But it is, yeah, I'm saying if you want to put like or whatever, right? Yeah, totally. But we might play the stage for the toy drive. That was yeah, yeah, I'm not sure if you guys know. Yeah, exactly. It's something at a time, right? Yeah, totally. Yeah, that should be good though. Yeah. It has the bluff to bring on and such name. I keep her like people into what's going on, but like that. We spent a couple of spots come on board now, and then we're gonna actually hold another wildlife fund. So the one fund. So just the wildlife right now. So the state's in the run. State of the wildlife. Yeah. So how long is the run? Yeah, so it's a one that just under 1K for like you do 5K, but it's not really. Yeah, I can't believe I love like the part of my husband's like yeah. So ugly. That's great. Although it's a battery's one. Class is the most perfect you'll ever see it. Fabulous. It's so perfect. Yeah. That'll be a lot of fun. Yeah. And I hear Danica. Yes, that's why. Yeah. She's the one who put us on the wildlife class. That was all over the regional. It was so much fun. So yeah, it's nice too because it was like really nice. And it's phenomenal too. So yeah. So I get down to 400 actually. I was thinking about it. I had to write it, and then maybe she got to work. Let's think about it. Yeah, it's just fun. So yeah, we walked it. So it's going walk like that. Just for the case, it's not walking. Yeah, it's great that way. She's I'm working at Kelly during the summer, so she's it's great. Like I've learned so much from her. That's her. She does. She's so creative, and yeah, she knows everybody, but it's also helpful. She's like, there's some best people in the city. She's very happy. It's lovely.
Charge the thing.
It's hard to
Shocking, what sort of target audience? I think you have. I think also have. They're gonna have to live with decisions and maybe for a long time. So. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, Arjun's got the microphone.
Hello. We're, what's called hockey? Anybody know? Okay. Big hockey going on right now, just building on what Ken was saying. We have a great esteemed media panel here of folks who will be covering the Pacific election, who will have different a lot of different things they're doing, different approaches, and really the ideas about how to get good information out to folks on a broad basis out. Saying, we're all here, people who are excited about democracy and civics, and we can get that word out to more people. That's going to be really part of the hope here. And I was chatting to someone here who was saying, it's really hard for folks to get sometimes to find. There's so much bad information out there. And kind of getting good information is really important. So how we're talking to kids in schools, what the sort of information about how council and mayor and school trustees actually work is all important stuff to kind of think about. So I have here today James Spears from CFJC. Thanks for coming. Randy's here from the Ren, Holly Ferguson from the Ren. Thanks for coming. Kristen Holiday is also a good runner. Kristen Holiday and Tim Patrick from Castanet. And then Paul James from Miami Radio and Health. So these are some of the best journalists in the community and even further afield. So we wanted to ask them, give them a little bit of time, talk about what they're thinking about the civic election, what's sort of some of the issues that may be coming up for them, what some of the things they're looking to cover, and then have a discussion after about kind of what we all think might be good to give feedback to folks about that as well. So, Ian, can I start with you? Want to start? Okay.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming to our well, are you gonna hear me all right? So CFJC, I mean, we try to give every municipal election comprehensive coverage as much as we can on television and web, especially radio as well. We our news coverage on the radio is a little bit dialed back than it used to be years ago. But TV and web are going to be key for us. What we have been doing so far, and I just counted it up, and I think we have 12, 13 candidates for council already who have declared their intentions to run, plus 3 mayoral candidates. We have done just what we've done so far is every time a candidate makes it public that they are intending to run for either council or mayor, we'll try to catch up with them, do an interview on camera, just a little introductory. Who are you? What are your priorities? That type of thing. It's still 5 months out, 4 months out from the vote, so it's still pretty early on. We'll get more intensive as it gets a little closer to the vote. What else? We will have kind of different strategies for the way we cover it for television. Television, it brings with it its own limitations. The average TV news story is 2.5 minutes at the most. That's not a lot of time to tell a story about an individual, let alone about an election race. So that you have to be creative by tell stories on the web. We have a little bit more space, a little bit more leeway. So we've done in the past, sure, this year, some more sort of in-depth Q&A with some of the candidates who come up. This year is going to be unique. I think nobody within the city of Kamloops. I think that's a pretty well accepted fact by everyone that every year the election, every election that we have, the election campaign is to some degree a reaction to the past council, right? Nobody runs for council and says, I'm just going to do the exact same thing that this previous council did. We're just going to keep the train rolling. Everyone has something different that they're going to do, and I think this time around, I think it's pretty fair to say that the vast majority of the new candidates, maybe not the incumbents, but the new candidates will be running as a reaction to the current council. Will have something different that they want to do. I think you're probably going to hear all of them say that that dysfunction and divisiveness that you've heard a ton about over this past term is something that they want to put an end to. You're going to hear a lot of candidates talk about street issues and safety. We've already heard that a lot. And, I do an editorial on TV once a week, and when you get a little sneak preview, but tomorrow we'll be talking a little bit about encouraging candidates to go beyond the tropes that a lot of them are going to come up with. I love Kamloops. I don't want there to be dysfunction. We need to tackle street issues. Okay, what more? I mean, every single one of them is going to say that. And so get a little bit more specific with your plans and your strategy. So that's my thoughts about what's going to happen, what we're hoping to do. You also asked about how to get a hold of us or how to interact with us. Most of it's online, but through cfjctoday.com. But this plays into some of what Ken was saying. The landscape today as well is that we get lost among so much other stuff on social media. First of all, we can't publish on the meta platforms. We can't use Facebook or Instagram. Reddit, I guess, is their Twitter. And even on the platforms where we are able to publish, there's so much of the noise there that it's very difficult unless you're looking for us to find us. So that is probably the best way to get a hold of us. You can find us on social media. It's just, I think that's the challenge. One of the challenges of our industry this time right now is getting noticed amongst all the other online. Probably is good enough for me. I'm a little bit friendly.
So I'm Brady from the Wren, and I think that generally when we approach elections across our organization, we try to do it from an engaged journalism perspective. So we tend to try and look beyond how to cover an election as a horse race, as, you know, who's in front, what kind of political strategy is working right now, and kind of get beyond that type of coverage into coverage that gets into the issues that people really care about. And the reason that we know what people really care about is because we continually ask them. We have feedback built into all of our channels with our readers so that we know what is high priority for them. And we try to work that into all of our coverage. So we really don't ask questions that we haven't been given guidance from our readers. So that's kind of how we approach it. And I'll let Holly tell you a little bit more about what we're going to do for this specific election coming up. And we also have a bit of a privilege here in Kamloops that we have a lot of media, so we can take a step back and focus on a little bit of a slower pace and take things a little bit more in depth than if we were trying to churn out a lot of stories every day. So we're just trying not to repeat what is already happening here in town. We're trying to add to our coverage to complement it, to build a healthy media ecosystem and not to replicate what's happening, because we all have so few resources that it really doesn't make sense to do that. So I really feel like it's a team effort, and this election is going to be, from a local media standpoint, probably kind of fun. And I'll also say that in-person events are really big for us. So you can reach us through all of our digital channels. Our newsletter is a great way. Email is a great way to get in touch with us. But we also make a really big effort to go out and be in communities. So for this weekend, we're at the farmers market on Saturday, talking to folks. We're going to be at Pride on Sunday, talking to different people, talking to younger folks, trying to get a real good sense of what they want to see from us headed into this election period. So that's like a very broad view of how we're approaching it. Yeah, can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah, the editor of the Red, Freddie spoke a lot about, you know, like our broad visions to sort of like, narrow it really closely down. Like she said, we have a lot of feedback, options for people, that really like stands out in our surveys. We do a lot of surveys where we connect, sort of one-on-one with our readers and ask very specific questions like what is your biggest what's your biggest concern in this election, which I find it so funny that journalists have such an interesting sense of fun, but it's really fun to like hear back from people and hear what their biggest concerns are and what really matters. We really try to cut through the noise. I think of, you know, like generally, elections can get really loud, and so we try to really focus in on what readers, what's going to serve them and what impacts their daily life, not just like a broad vision of maybe like what they want to see in the future, but what's really impacting them on like the day-to-day basis. If that's like transportation or, you know, recovery services or the economy or what have you, within the confines of that specific, you know, election, right? So, like the former mayor spoke about earlier, a lot of readers write in with some misconceptions about like like whatever branch they're voting for can do. So like previously that was federal, and they were really writing in with concerns that was like council related. And so that's something that we also try to do. Like the feedback isn't one way. So if our readers write in with something that's like really, you know, like that's a federal or, you know, like a regional topic, that's something that we communicate to them. And I think our go-to editorially is that we like to create really easy to use accessible guides. So like where to go, where to vote, what do you need to vote, what identification do you need? Things that we hear from people like, you know, might get frustrated with, like Ken said, like just if you can only vote a maximum of 8 people, making sure that people know that you can only vote a maximum of 8 people, so their ballots don't get spoiled and they don't ruin their, you know, like opportunity. So that's kind of like how we approach the fine points of our working group. Hi everyone, I'm Kristen Holiday. I'm the regional editor at Kamloops, and then also our newsroom's City Hall lead reporter. So,
Tough cookie she is, I won't.
it's elections are a big deal in our newsroom. It's a bit of a report for us to kind of bring coverage on the issues and all the candidates, specifically in a municipal election. And we know that things can get there can be a lot of candidates, there can be a lot of information to sort through. So we try to make things easy for people to access and understand. So our plan as candidates are, potential candidates are announcing their intent to run. We are, you'll see us put some bios together on these people, we'll interview them, some of the, what's the objective is just a little bit about who these people are, why they're choosing to run, what they're passionate about, and then coming a little bit closer to the actual election. In the months towards the election, we'll be sitting down with the candidates, going through asking them questions on topics that are important to the voters who go around. And then we're going to be putting together some stories that let people know where these candidates all stand on these issues. We'll also be bringing coverage on all the debates and the forums and things like that are going to be happening in the election, as well as some explainers as well, some articles letting people know things like where to vote, how to vote. Yeah, we'll try to bring information on each candidate, like I say, as accessible as possible on our website, so people are able to see what each person has said, where to find more information, essentially. So yeah, it's kind of top issues are concerned. I've heard a lot of people, as James said, they're stepping forward because they've seen something that they haven't liked in the last 4 years as far as behavior that they've seen on council and in City Hall. So there's a lot of people who are running in reaction to that. Street disorder, homelessness, mental health continues to be a really big topic in the city. There's a sense that there's a lot of residents and business owners who want to see more movement on that. That's going to be a big topic. City finances and taxation, I think, I've also got the sense that there's a lot of people who have their eye on that. And there's some folks who have come out and said who want to see some differences in how these things are done at City Hall. And then I'm interested myself to see what's going to be the conversation around the recreation facilities. This council has been really focused a lot on building Kamloops and putting some bigger recreation facilities out there. And there's plans for more in the future. And so it'll be interesting to see with the next group of people who get elected, where they choose to take this. As far as tips, we'd love to hear from our readers about what they want to see from us in terms of the election coverage coming up. Any feedback that you have. We're all pretty easy to get a hold of. Click on our byline in the story and our contact information will pop up. There's the general news at castanet.net. You can reach out to any one of us through there. We're always willing to hear from folks. So I'll pass it on over to the user.
Tim Bentley from the news director of Castle Kamloops. I think one issue, dark horse maybe that Kristen did is the centers. We're hearing more about that. And then one other way to both follow what we're doing and keep in touch with us is sign up for our newsletter. Go to our website, CastleKamloops.net, sign up, and you'll get all the news every day. And there's every way to interact. This is great.
Well, James, how are you doing? Well, obviously, we've seen some changes at our station, but when the elections are moved forward, we're going to be sort of, I guess, harkening back to the talk show sort of mentality. I'm going to take candidates and sit them down and have a conversation with them. At least, not break it down to do about half of the program, but do a little bit of block programming and set aside part of it to introduce the candidates as they move forward, of mayoral and for council as well, and just sort of set aside each opportunity, maybe a half hour each day, to try and sort of keep those things as we move forward, more towards the end of the actual the election cycle or the actual vote itself. Now, Tim brought up the interesting one about the data centers. There's a few things out there that I think are going to become more topical, I think, as we move forward here. And I think one of the things that I'm going to be watching is whether or not we're going to see a push between, the incumbency and the new faces. Who's going to remain and who's going to stay, right? And I think that's going to be a litmus test for what we're going to see as far as, the development of Kamloops is concerned. Are we going in the right direction? Is this council doing what people want? Or is this council maybe in the wrong direction and do we need change? I don't know. I mean, it's a very interesting sort of dynamic that I don't think a lot of people have been able to put their finger on whether or not this is the right direction, or is it the noise that the naysayers are making? Is that who is going to drive this election forward? It's going to be very interesting to see. As Kim sort of pointed out, we've got 30% of the electorate who steps up every time. How is that the noisemakers, or is that the people who are actually interested in seeing change? I don't know. So this will be the thing that I think is going to be the most interesting to watch. Is whether or not we're going to bring back the incumbents, or whether or not we're going to see a whole new crop of people. And if so, who are those people? Are they going to be people who want change, or do they want to light it on fire and see what happens? It's going to be an interesting dynamic, to say the least.
Hey, if you want to watch the game, we will close the ears. 3-1 Carolina. That's what everybody knows. We actually asked people register to come. There was some questions that came up from folks. And I wanted to just pose, and I'll open up to folks in a second here. A lot of these questions around the neutrality of the media, how the media itself kind of works to sort of have some rigor around their own bias or disinformation, or or what kind of things that we do to try to make sure that we, the information we have can be trusted, I guess, is generally what I'm sort of getting out of the questions we have. So this one is, essentially, I wonder how keep media neutral as you proceed through all these campaigns these years. Are there criteria to revisit or insist on? Are the ethics around disclosing bias? What are elements of good journalism or coverage? So, anybody want to start on that?
Well, I'll take that one. I mean, that's pretty loaded, but,
It wants to be somebody else.
no, I'm not blaming anybody. You know, it's very valid. And I think it's one that I think we also struggle with. Is that, are we biased? Do we bring our own bias to what we write, to what we report, what we, bring forward as individuals? I think a lot of people sort of view the media as this collective group, right? As this collective entity that sort of works in lockstep for whatever reason, right? And I don't, people may take that one way or the other, but we're people. We have our own thoughts and views on things, and whether or not they're correct all the time, of course, it's going to slant it in one way or the other. Now, would you prefer that compared to what some people might say is just the tic-tac toe? Here's your straight up news, and here's what you're going to get day in and day out. I don't know. What I do know is that everything is factually based, and I think I can give them this and say that everything that everybody does here is all based on fact. Now, you can have your opinion about how we lay out those facts, but I think every one of us would say, I think we can be honest with ourselves, that we were doing the best we can with the facts that we're given and that are available to us. Now, that being said, you can arrange the facts in a certain way that may make it seem biased, but whether or not it will screw it, that's up to you. That's your opinion of what happens, and what we view as right or wrong. Well, that's a question mark, for a lot of different folks. But to answer, the question in a basic roundabout way, I think there's a lot of, we always have to sort of self-censor, and then sort of go, okay, well, am I being overly biased, or am I looking at things in a correct or way in which I don't want to throw things out that are going to make myself look like I've got an agenda, because that's really what I don't think anybody really wants, especially for legitimate news organizations, to be somebody who's viewed as not giving you the honest, straight up truth.
Yeah, right.
They have bad information out there that you need to do some, you need to be diligent to find good sources of news and tolerate places like these ones. We all play by the same set of facts. But if you're on social media or other places, those people are not always playing by the same set of facts. And you need to be aware of that. Sometimes it's hard to tell. So it takes a lot of media literacy.
I was just gonna play on what Paul was saying, is that I think like in J school, journalism schools now, we don't really talk about objectivity in the way that we used to. Essentially, there is no such thing as being completely objective. The more responsible thing to do as a journalist is realize that you do have experiences that have shaped you, and that you're gonna be looking at certain stories in certain ways. And I also think that like an older school view of media, where everybody would have been like, oh, media was always objective and fair. Other people would have said, actually, that media was incredibly pro-business and racist. So it's an evolution, and if there's a perspective in it. I think that what we try to do at the Wren is to ensure that everything that we're writing is accurate and fair. And instead of saying like objective and balanced, there's a nuance in there that you can kind of grasp as a reporter. I would say for folks who are looking to make sure that their information is produced in an journalistic ethically way, is to look at what the media site has posted. Do they say that they follow the Canadian rules, the Canadian ethics, Canadian journalism ethics? What else do they have posted that shows how are they transparently operating? What are their community guidelines? Do they have posted facts about how they handle certain things? And who can you get in touch with about a concern about a story? These are all kind of like green flags that people need to know so that they can, like Tim said, wade through the good information and the bad information and do a tiny bit more legwork to figure out is this information or potentially like disinformation?
James, oh, that's it. Oh, sorry. Doesn't matter. Yeah. That's right. It's just a gift.
I think just kind of briefly, I think I find myself quite lucky to be in a newsroom of people where we talk through our stories quite often. And I think that's maybe what people don't see when they read a news story. They don't quite know. And nor should you. How would you know that, you know, there are words that we will sit in the newsroom and talk about. Should I use this word? Should I use a different word? Should I call this person and get their take? Should I call this other person and get theirs? You know, these are conversations that we have, and I think like that helps when, you know, you yourself, you're coming at something with, you know, you're a human being, you're coming at it with your own idea of how, you know, how you want to present the facts. And then it helps to have a sounding board as well, to say, look, I think I've done a good job in representing this fairly, but I would like to get your take on it and your take on it. And that's where it's really valuable for me. And I think we can speak for everyone in our newsroom when I say it's a really good thing to have that sounding board where we're just leaning on each other to catch these things and to hone our product.
I just want to say, Tim mentioned media literacy, and I always hate that cringe that the guy who goes, "Oh, back in the day, it was like this." Well, back in the day, it was. You know, I think we understood that there was reporting in one bucket, and opinion in another bucket, and propaganda in another bucket, and then entertainment in another bucket. Now there's one bucket, and that's content. That so many people are absorbing. And I think that media literacy in determining the differences between those different categories has been lost for a lot of people. I have a hard time with explaining the difference between. I mentioned earlier I do an editorial once a week, but I also do some reporting, not as much as I used to. But explaining the difference to certain mayors of Kamloops between certain sitting mayors of Kamloops between the difference between my editorials and my reporting, and that's been a big challenge for me. But it's, you know, not to, but it's a difficulty for a lot of different people. When I'm doing an editorial, it's an opinion piece. I'm putting an opinion out there. I have to, as a professional, be able to put that aside when I'm about my reporting now. Put that aside and report facts and tell the story in as fair and balanced a way as I can.
Just quickly before I open up to other questions, on the Chronicle side, John Brady is our city council beat reporter. And again, the Chronicle is all basically freelancers who work outside of that. So we're not at a point yet where we have full-time reporters. Tim asked me a question today. We're going to try to get there as soon as we can, and hopefully utilize some of these folks for advice and guidance as we kind of go. And so we most of that stuff is sort of stuff that the freelance reporters we have. We have I think 6 or 7 people we pay that do city council, public safety, school district, arts and entertainment, business, and then sports. I think that's kind of the sort of variety we have now. And they all sort of come up with stuff mostly themselves. So we're trying to figure out also how to kind of have stories that we can kind of have a bit of like a bit more kind of conversation like Chris was talking about, having like, you know, a bit of chat, what things are good to also have in there as well that the community will on, so that we all think is a good idea. So that's kind of where we're evolving, and once a month we have a little Zoom meeting with all the freelance folks, and we kind of have that conversation. We should probably have a little bit more. And Sean, unfortunately, his mom passed away, so he's on to it. And he's also very interested in hearing and sharing all this with folks as we go. So Chronicles, editor of CamlooPsChronicles.com is the best way to get a hold of us for that kind of thing. Okay, all that said, questions from the floor, please. Jen.
I was just wondering, for some running off to the Dominican,
in the group and start some of those for discerning credible information.
I was just wondering if it might be an idea, because one of the things, the common themes I noticed amongst people that run for maybe letting their emotions kind of lead them for why they want to run, which I guess is fine, but is that they're not maybe informed about like the scope of the job or what's within their purview. So I'm just wondering if there's a way though, not necessarily of making a whole article about, by the way, here's the scope of the job, because that they need to do that, but can like questions be prefaced with a reference to, hey, knowing that health and whichever are under this purview, what will you do about or something? Or how do you envision you using the scope of your perspective position to do? Do you know what I mean? So it's at least laid against something factual, like cited from the charter or whatever, just so that even the reader accidentally gets a little bit educated at the same time. Just in little, I don't know if that's an idea.
It's definitely, and I'll pass this along to whoever wants to respond as well, but it's definitely a good follow-up question. Is what when I was mentioning wanting to push candidates beyond just saying we need to clean up the streets, public safety, I'm gonna cut down kind of thing. It's a great follow-up question to say, well, policing is is funded by, directed in a large part by the other levels of government. Healthcare is directed by the other levels of government. How would you do it in your purview? What's your strategy, right? So I think that's a really good point.
We do have a guide on the REN right now, which is the difference between provincial and federal jurisdictions that was put out specifically so that people would have this information. And do we have a municipal one yet? Yeah, we also have a municipal one. So that is there if people want to use it.
Any other? Okay, Ken.
The municipal act talks about, or the Elections Act talks about how much candidates can spend, and the mayor in this race in Kamloops, and I don't know it's been released yet, it'll be somewhere around $60,000 per mayor candidate. How do you square their advertising buys with your editorial preferences?
I try to have as little idea as possible of what's happening on what I call the other side of the building, which is the revenue side of the building. I have a general idea if we're doing okay or not. Otherwise, and if I go to our website and I see a big full page scroll, and there is one, I think there's a few candidates who have already bought ads on our website. I see who's advertising with us, but other than that, I try to put up that kind of firewall between the authority side and the revenue side, and not really have any idea whatsoever who's spending what.
At the REN, we rely on our readers for our funding, and that is really who we're accountable to, and that is lends itself into everything that we do. So I think that that's incredibly helpful when we know that we're being funded by people in the community. That's who we can be accountable to. Across our organization, we don't necessarily pay political or campaign. We have outlets on Vancouver Island where the current policy is not to take campaign ads. In Sun Peaks, we do, because we're the only local news source up in Sun Peaks, so we do municipal candidate ads, but it's quite limited because we're only printing once a month. And yeah, I just think it's like, honestly, the reporters are so busy and have their heads down in what they're doing. I honestly don't think that any folks on this panel are really caring who's spending money on what, unless it's getting outrageous and like turns into a story of its own, I would say.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on what Brandon said, is that we are funded by readers, and so we do directly, we are beholden to our readers. So what they ask us and the fact that they, they contribute what they can on a monthly or, however often they're able to. That does play a large part in how we do our editorial. So if they ask the question, we really want to answer it in the most factual, accurate, fair way that we possibly.
Similar to CFPC, we, in our newsroom, don't really have any, we don't have any idea what the advertising people are doing. This time. But every election, someone will phone me or email me, usually multiple people, and say, accuse us of, placing an ad with a certain story, like a good story with a certain ad, or vice versa. And frankly, we have no idea where the ads are running. But I tell those people that it's true, we have no idea where the ads are running. So totally, it goes with firewall.
Well, same thing with us. Don't get me wrong, I would trip my radio station out like NASCAR if I could. Because quite frankly, we need the money, but in the same respect, there has to be a church and state aspect of the whole thing, because otherwise it just becomes problematic, not just for, as sort of alluding to the perception that is out there, but I can't know, right? If I do know, then that is just going to throw a huge monkey wrench into my own psyche as far as being able to be an upper journalist and certainly do this. But that being said, there's a lot of different areas where you go, okay, well, how much is financing would be pushing that area? And it's a great question, because there are, as Ken pointed out, limits to how much you can spend, but in the same respect, there's also limits to how much you can give certain coverage to somebody without almost sounding like we're giving them free advertising. Right? Where do we find that balance? Where do we find that limit? And something we have to be cognizant of, because the airtime that we give is not free, except for the news. But how much of that airtime are we devoting to the point where it becomes, oh, am I giving them free advertising? Right? So it's something that has to sort of stick in your mind as you move forward. And be careful.
Let me just throw a question in from the earlier feedback. So how can the media hold candidates accountable in a timely manner for themselves sharing this information?
Well, that's a $64,000 question right there. I think a lot of it falls upon us, as journalists, more informed about what exactly is going on a day in and day out basis, and being able to sort of push back initially when that, fallacy, is pushed forward. A lot of people will try or this, I don't know if they try, it's more of just a, mistake on their behalf. They'll put on information that they've heard or whatever the case may be, or they believe to be true. If you don't push back right away, it becomes part of the lexicon. It becomes part of the conversation. But that being said, is that our goal? Is that our job to, police people right away, or is that our job just to allow them to say what they want, and then police then let you, as their leaders, viewers or listeners, police them afterwards? I don't know. There's a debate to be said that maybe we should just allow them to be. To allow them to say what they want to say. You can think it's stupid, or you can think it's right. I don't know. There's two schools of thought on that. Well, my thought is that you can't let them just be completely. They can't go out and just say stupid things for the sake of saying stupid things without them being able to give them some pushback, whether it be on the spot or whether it be after the fact. You have to be able to find a balance in there somewhere. But the question then becomes, okay, how much of that leeway can you give them? I don't know. It's one that I struggle with.
I think sometimes when you, maybe push back, maybe is a little bit of strong phrasing, but when you say, okay, well, okay, what about this? Or you've said this, how do you square that with this fact? That person can just double down, right? Like, I think that's a condition of the world we live in now, unfortunately, and sometimes people just live in their own realities. And when presented with a set of facts, they still double down on what they think. And so in that case, what we have to do is, we present what the person said, we present the, you know, what the fact that may not jive with what they're saying. And then we let the reader make that call, right? One of the green flags, as you put it, of a good journalism outlet is we make the sources really clear, right? So we'll say, okay, this person is saying this, and this is where you can find this other information that may say something very different. And then whoever's reading can assess those sources and decide which one they believe is more trustworthy.
But, somebody's buzzword on the day 7:30, it's kind of crazy. Okay, I gotta check my pills. That's all. Okay. Yeah, thanks for wanting me as well. Check my pills too. Please, Randy.
A little bit removed from us, but when Trump got elected the first time, it's kind of a case study in what happens when media doesn't push back and allows these falsehoods to just be kind of like run rampant. And what we're seeing now, even at municipal and even at school board levels, is that candidates are saying things to get the clip, and then they push that clip out on their own channels, and people are bypassing the media totally. So I don't really know if there's a way that us on this panel can fix that. Like the things that are happening right now on a digital scale are incredibly sophisticated, but I think a broad answer is that we need healthy local media ecosystems and that we need to work as a team. And instead of trying to compete with each other, we need to build on each other's work and continue to push candidates to be accountable, whether they're saying something on the spot or in a forum or on social. So yeah, that would be my like very broad approach to that.
It's 7:30, folks. I don't want to take too much more time. I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. It's a nice summer evening. It's hockey evening, so I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I'll turn it over to Tom and Tequila in a second here, but I just wanted to, you know, as a local news nonprofit, you know, the Kamloops Society is really committed to working collaboratively with all our media family and community, and you know, everybody here has helped out with the Chronicle and in different ways, and we really appreciate it. We want to return that sort of back and forth. So, you know, hopefully look for lots of collaboration between all of us and get into the election more and more, and we'll try to figure out ways of doing that in really powerful ways. Michaela, over to you. Here you go.
Yeah, just to mirror what Arjun said, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We hope the evening proved to be informative and useful as you prepare to vote. Be sure to stay tuned to the Kamloops Chronicle for updates on upcoming events.
And I'd just like to thank all of the members of our panel for some really thoughtful answers to some really rather challenging questions. We're in a really interesting time right now. And I'd like to thank Ken for his insightful discussion of the challenge of having only 1 in 3 people decide to take the effort to go out and cast a ballot. And I think in some discussions we've had, we know some of the targets that we have to get are younger people. And I think families, I think parents with kids are going to have to live with the consequences of some of the decisions for a very long time. And I think that's a really important group that we should aim at. But to end with, I want to thank you guys sincerely for taking the time. It's a very busy time of year for all of us. And to put the thought that you put into doing it, and again, to have a healthy ecosystem where we can communicate with each other and talk about what some of those challenges that we're facing are, is the most important thing we can have.
More ice cream and more of that.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out that there's lots of goodies over there, and please, everyone avail yourself of it. And I'd like to thank Arjun for putting this all together. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.